The rapid evolution of wireless technology requires new solutions and standards to ensure higher quality of experience for consumers around the world. So what will the next generation of wireless technology beyond 5G actually look like, and what will it enable us to do? Well, I'm sure that Mérouane Debbah has some answers to those questions. He's director of the Mathematical and Algorithmic Sciences Lab of Huawei, and I'd like to welcome him to the stage.
Donc bonjour, c'est un vrai plaisir.
Good morning. I'm very happy to be together with every one of you. So I'll be speaking French since we're in France. And if you have any questions, I may also speak English if needed. Today I will talk about the future, i.e. the technologies beyond 5G. First of all, I'd like to talk about these three waves of dividends. The first is the demographic dividend. 2, 3 Gs, you're very familiar, are there for wireless communication per se, of which 3G specializes in video communication. And after that is the traffic dividend, i.e. the 4G, based on the mobile communication and mobile internet. 4G has passed, and we're now ushering in 5G, which specializes not only in man-to-man communication, but also things-to-things communication, i.e. the IoT. But also, it is embedded with artificial intelligence to make sure these communication channels are intelligent. We are calling for a hyper-connected, intelligent world because telecom is not only for communication of information, but also about sensing the world around you, and also connection, i.e. connecting every dot on the Earth in a three-dimensional way. Also, the idea of flying terminal is one enabler for that. And in addition to that, we're going to build an intelligent world, including intelligent entities like machines, robots, that not just transmit a sentence or a word, but a meaning. Devices can sense, i.e. a camera is able to capture all details. And such sensors can not only capture the image, but also can feel pressure and temperature, so that you'll be able to perceive the ambient environment with more accurate and complete information transmitted to you. In every location, all kinds of information can be collected and perceptions can be collected. And there is combination of technologies, a combination of multiple disciplines. For example, mathematics, chemistry, and physics. And through your mobile phone, you'll be able to penetrate the walls to be able to perceive. And also, a panoramic picture of the environment can be descripted for you. Through electromagnetic wave, this map surrounding you can be constructed for you. There's a lot of analytics as well. By analyzing the data now conveys a certain meaning, and in the meantime, the spectrum plays an even bigger role. As 5G comes, we're not just using ordinary spectrum of common hertz, because we can be up to 20 gigahertz of wave. Today's electromagnetic wave is closing to terahertz, which can be extremely accurate in the positioning, be able to have visibility in the environment, and be able to see the changes going on around you. And the next area is artificial intelligence. There are mathematical tools at hand today that can enable you to extract a certain meaning from data. What we witnessed in recent years is that compressed sensing, as well as categorization methods, among many other mathematical methods, have been deployed. At Huawei, we are working with talented mathematicians. We work with the Fields Medal winners to research on topology. We also work with Piang, also a Fields medalist, to analyze and extract the meaning out of data. In terms of algorithm, as we all know, there are other exciting things going on about the artificial intelligence.
All of you have heard of these three people. They are developers of artificial intelligence, including deep learning. They have made significant progress in this field. The first person uses algorithms and has contributed greatly to it. The second person uses reinforcement learning. And the third person uses the computing power. They have used massive amounts of data to develop machine learning tools. Apart from the computing power, another thing is they can use the scale, for example, cloud computing, and also edge AI. So in total, there are different computing scenarios. These are all paradigms for computing, and they can be used in machine learning. The third aspect I want to talk about will also be very important in the future. That is connection. They will provide data. As we can see, there are three major areas. First, holoportation. And edge intelligence. So this will be an application for the days beyond 5G. the data rate will exceed 1 terabit per second, because there will be many interconnected objects. So there will be a massive amount of traffic. And another example is self-driving vehicles. They will generate 4 terabytes of data every day, because there will be many cameras equipped with the vehicles. They will take photos of the surrounding environment, and many pictures will be generated. The third area is related to latency, and it's artificial latency. This is related to autonomous driving. The latency will be several milliseconds. We are also working with banks on latency, because they are having increasingly stricter requirements for latency, because the financial transactions require very low latency. It has to be less than 1 millisecond to meet their demand. So this is what we are doing to shape the future. This is 1948. And we already have a paradigm for communication. That's what we call Shannon 1.0. It requires the transmission of information end-to-end without any errors. Today, the requirement is not just about transmitting data, but the transmitting of meaning. So in this end-to-end transmission process, we need to represent the meaning or the sense. The sense has to be transmitted. So you need to use intelligent protocols to do that. The more you communicate with someone, it will be easier to do the transmission. Intelligence is everywhere in our life. Now, as we can see, the core network has become intelligent, and the cloud has become intelligent. Having said that, we still have many difficulties to overcome. Now, we have some collaborative algorithms that can be deployed on the device or the cloud or the edge. We can build artificial intelligence to achieve the purposes we desire. Why do I talk about the architecture? Because there are many barriers, including latency and power. We are not able to transmit or process all the data, but now we are using collaborative algorithms. It means we don't need to extract data from every source for computing or processing. In this way, we can do some collaborative artificial intelligence. We're moving from 4G to 5G, and the major transformation is the shift from connecting people to connecting things. In the past, many things were dumb. Not much processing was carried out, but now these objects are connected. In this way, the humans and the things will become intelligent, and communication will be possible between people and the things. We're also building intelligent entities and objects, and we're developing some architectures. About 1 year ago, some agencies we worked with in Europe started to work towards this vision. In 2011, 2012, we started to build such a 5G ecosystem. It was a preliminary system. It consists of 3 parts. Number 1, the speed can be 10 gigabits per second. Number 2, massive connections. So the entire ecosystem is connected. The third thing is latency. This is a main feature and objective of 5G, that is for the latency to be less than 1 millisecond. So what are the possibilities in the future? We are already discussing this topic. Right now, we are developing 5G+. We are already in the midst of exploration of this, and then we can turn 5G+ into 5G++ between 2024 and 2028. By 2030, we'll be able to achieve the target, that is to build a fully connected, intelligent world, and the information will be 1 terabyte. The second aspect I want to talk about is massive connections, including hundreds of billions of connections. The third thing that will be realized very soon is geographical positioning with high accuracy. So all things can be positioned accurately, and the margin for error is about 10 centimeters. This is not a reality yet, but it will be in the future. Last but not least, I want to talk about latency. We want the latency to be 0.1 millisecond, and we want jitter to be 0.1 millisecond. We can configure the Internet of Things, which we could not do in the past, and now we can cover more things in the IoT. So this is just a brief introduction to 5G and our vision for the future in the space of 20 minutes. We want to evolve from a connected world to an intelligent world. And we are working with the entire ecosystem to make that happen. Our hope is that our scientists and our customers can all work together to make it a reality. I hope it will become reality in the next few years in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mérouane, for yet another fascinating glimpse of the future towards which we appear to be accelerating extremely rapidly. Now, digital technology has become ubiquitous in everyday life, but its impact extends well beyond the everyday. It's having a profound effect on our culture. So I guess it's fitting that we're meeting here in Paris, one of the great cultural centers of the world. The rest of our program from now until lunchtime will discuss the impact of technology on our culture in association with publicists. And to introduce this next section, I'm delighted to welcome to the stage Myriam Boutoul. Myriam is one of France's leading arts journalists from the magazine Connaissance des Arts. Myriam. Aha.
Bonjour à tous.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Hotel de Rothschild, which is also the foundation of the Foundation of Artists. We're hosting the Huawei European Innovation Day, and quite obviously, digital transformation is also impacting culture. Today, we're going to be looking at the impact of digital innovation on creation, on mediation, on the dissemination of art and culture. through tools such as virtual and augmented reality, immersive exhibits, Moocs, as well as AI. We won't be looking at technical aspects only, but we will be discussing society as a whole. Digital is more and more seen as an extension of our bodies. Are we becoming augmented or diminished humans? In introduction, I'm going to have Kristin Albanel, who's the former Minister of Culture and Communication, and who is the Executive Director of Orange. She will be presenting her action at the Minister and her efforts in digital. She will tell us about innovative digital projects supported by the Orange Foundation to democratize access to arts, books, and in order to reach out to a much broader audience. We will have representatives from a number of prestigious Parisian cultural institutions. They're going to share their vision with us, and they're going to tell us about their digital strategies to reach out to, once again, a different audience. We will see what artists are doing to create a new form of aesthetic and how they use it to boost their imagination. We will have a final and third session during which we will have artistic stakeholders who are trying to create new forms of art and who are developing solutions to innovate and increase the quality of our heritage. We will talk about open data and we will talk about copyright. Without further ado, I would like to ask Mrs. Kristin Albanel to join me on stage.
Bonjour. Excusez-moi. Excusez-moi. Voilà. Madame Albanel, vous êtes donc directrice exécutive d'Orange et présidente déléguée.
Director of Orange, the Orange Foundation, since 2010. You have worked as an advisor in culture for Jacques Chirac, former President Jacques Chirac. You worked for the public establishment of Versailles, and you were then appointed Minister of Culture and Communication in 2007 during Mr. Sarkozy's term of office. You're a graduate in literature. After your experience with your background at the time where the Ministry of Culture is celebrating its 60th anniversary, it was created 60 years ago by Mr. Malraux. Tell us a little bit about your experience at the ministry. Well, first of all, good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me this morning. My experience, I guess the lesson, and this is quite encouraging for France, is that I think we have, France has a very strong cultural message, and I think that the message is heard more than we think. When I was the minister, I think that one of the most important bills I submitted was the one on copyrights, defending the copyrights, which was back then called internet creation. When I was the minister, the internet had already emerged and had already started its to impact everything, and some industries were struggling and had very, rightful questions. The music industry, for example, as well as the movie industry. The entertainment industry in France is probably the third largest in the world. In other words, much was at stake, and I did everything along with President Sarkozy to defend copyrights. We voted a bill, a law which now is effective, and back then we also had the French presidency of the European Union, and that is how I realized that other European countries were sort of waiting to see what the French were going to do, to then decide for themselves. And so the bottom line is the legal landscape changed. In some countries less than in others, but I think that in terms of copyrights became a real political question, a political issue. And I don't think we should underestimate ourselves. In the area of culture, I think France has a strong voice. In literature, the movie industry, we've always paved or sometimes paved the way. Right, so the Création and Internet law was eventually passed in 1929 and led to the high authority of internet-based creations, Adobe, otherwise known as Adobe. And one of the issues we were trying to address back then was illegal downloading, right? You're absolutely right. Piracy, downloading was tremendous back then. A lot of record stores were closing, small ones, but also big ones, such as Fnac. Fnac was a retailer in the music industry. They were struggling, so we considered that for the music industry, it was almost too late. But then we saw the emergence of streaming, and streaming really grew to become a very powerful industry. It wasn't really very much the case back then. But so we were very keen, very adamant on defining rules to protect creators and artists. And this is really what's difficult. It's to allow abundance to unlimited possibilities to coexist with some strong principles and including preserving the rights of artists. And this is exactly where we were back then. And this is why why I submitted this bill, which eventually was promulgated and became a law. It was very much based on peer-to-peer. Peer-to-peer today is no longer at all how people consume cultural content. So things have really changed from a technical standpoint. Right. So digital, of course, you don't consider as a danger. And in hindsight, 10 years after, today we consider digital to offer endless options and possibilities with a lot of uncharted territories yet. You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. Uncharted territory indeed. I truly believe in digital arts, for example. The so-called digital arts are emerging. We have all kinds of events, cultural events, festivals, arts, electronica in Linz, Austria, Transmedia in Berlin. There's been a recent event in Issy-les-Moulineaux, the so-called Cube Festival. And so a lot is happening. And sometimes we have extremely bold ideas. In Paris, we have the Biennale des Arts Numériques. The Palais de Tokyo in Paris has been instrumental. At Orange, we partnered with a digital artist incubator. The event was called Push Your Art. And it was a great experience. Take video games. This is another experience. I'm not much into video games myself, but to a certain extent, I think they can be considered, video games can be considered as works of art. So indeed, a lot of uncharted territory, and as you said, unlimited access to everything, which is truly flabbergasting when you think of it. Music, unlimited access to music for a few euros. Same thing is for movies, TV series. There are all kinds of platforms that pop up here and there. With the really one of the questions is the question is overabundance and unlimited access to anything, which means consumers need advice, need guidance, and this is how you get communities, prescriptions to guide you into making better selections. Right. So I guess it is important indeed to provide the right advice to consumers, guide. It's digital seems to, spontaneously to go against culture because you're permanently distracted, you get push notifications, and you get this impression of being permanently overwhelmed and permanently forced to switch from one thing to the next. And this is a bit scary when you look at the younger generations. Their connection to time has been completely modified. But yet, it also gives you unlimited access to culture with wonderful terms and conditions. What I was also going to say is that one of the other benefits of digital is that digital has completely changed our practices. Today, cultural sites, stores, bookstores, for example. A few years ago, we thought bookstores would disappear. There were 2,700 bookstores. Today, they're not just bookstores anymore. They're cultural centers. They're places where all kinds of events are organized. Writers come to give talks. Conferences are organized. So they've really been able to reinvent themselves. Movie theaters are not just places where movies are shown. They've become much more. Again, where artists come, where events are organized, conferences. So it is more than just a screen displaying movies. And the digital industry is based very much on live, such as concerts, for example, in the music industry. And so this has really enriched the cultural offering at the end of the day. There's been quite a bit of research. 75% research suggests that 75% of people, when visiting a cultural event or an exhibit, a museum, people go online first to find out what they should expect to find. So most people show up prepared, and when they arrive on site, they have audio guides, digital audio guides. They have access to augmented reality in a very natural way, without any external constraints, without having a physical guide who is walking you around. You have more freedom than ever. Sometimes you can even organize on-site virtual visits. And possibly when you return home, you can continue your visit of Versailles. It's just an example. As you know, I have particular affection for Versailles. You can find out more about Versailles just through your headset at home. In a sense, your home becomes an extension of the visit, and you can become part of communities. You can have your own community. You can become a member of other communities, which has increased and is increasing cultural exchanges and practices. There are a lot of communities of art lovers who are truly passionate and who are willing to do more than just a visit. At Orange, for example, we have a book award. Now, I agree with the fact that it's not very original because there are a lot of prizes or book awards, but along with that award, we've created a very spontaneous community of readers. We have over 230,000 members. Is that on social media? Yes, indeed, social media. It's called lecteur.com. It's a community of people where all kinds of information, interviews, suggestions, tips, advice is shared between the community members. So again, this shows a multiplicity of aspects. We have, of course, the issue of copyright, which is still a burning issue, but at the same time, we have a lot of good practices, digital good practices. One of them being abundance, unlimited access to anyone, everyone, all the time. It is true in terms of education. At the Orange Foundation, we have digital schools in Africa, for example. We have 820 such digital schools in 15 countries with primary schools. And a lot of the kids who don't necessarily have a book, who don't necessarily have access to teachers, have a tablet on which they have absolutely everything. They have a Wikipedia, they have school books, they have the Khan Academy, they have free books. And it makes a huge difference. It changed everything. And take Moocs, massive online open courses. Moocs are also a door to knowledge. When traveling in France or abroad, if you've never set foot in Paris, well, you can still discover Picasso, for example. You can discover the French Impressionists. You can learn more about the Musée de l'Homme in Paris, which just reopened. And you can do this in a very entertaining and fun way. And that is also why it is so appealing to the younger generations. We've always struggled to attract younger people to museums. Well, here we go. Digital has made this a bit more possible. Very good. So, retrospectively, 10 years later, when you actually worked on these topics, and digital books, for example, there was a lot of concern. People were worried. 10 years after, it appears that there was no reason to worry. And we are seeing that today we have new artistic alternatives, such as augmented books. You mentioned Moocs as well. Social media are really driving this passion for reading forward. And as a matter of fact, you have written a novel recently and a number of plays as well. I think that digital is also something that has been driving you in your passion for books. Absolutely. I remember 10 years ago, we were convinced books were about to disappear. Well, it did not happen. It simply did not happen because people enjoy the touch and feel of paper. And bookstores are no longer just bookstores. They used to be bookstores. Today, they're places where people meet. They're places that organize events. And this is true for all types of literature, including literature for kids or teenagers. So we feared the end of paper books, and it did not happen. You mentioned augmented books. This was an interesting experiment we had with the French Bibliothèque, the Bibliothèque de France. We tested it on Candide of Voltaire and Le Bonheur des Dames by Zola. Having the book on a tablet, but also the original manuscript was fabulous, fascinating. Plus, you were able to click here and there. For example, in Le Bonheur des Dames, which is a novel by Zola on the emergence of department stores in the 19th century, you were able to click, and this would take you, the link would take you to a true experience and a discovery experience on department stores. To further gauge the impact of digital on culture, you would like to share with us what you've done, including at Orange, the Orange Foundation, with virtual reality, augmented reality, remote visits of museums, as well as Moocs. Here we go. This is the little piece of technology you need to show to display your material. Yes, indeed. I'm going to share a few things. You'll see, nothing really original. I'll finish up with Moocs, and Moocs is something we would like to truly pursue. So, one of the first things we did was at Versailles. This is an augmented reality app we developed to visit the gardens. There are a lot of remote areas in the gardens that people never see. You see them in particular during the summer when we have water events on the fountains. But a lot of people miss a lot of these small bushes that you find in the Versailles gardens. And so by using the app, we were able to create an augmented reality experience. We then had a similar app with a number of artists in France. We had, for example, one event with Eric Orsena, French writer Eric Orsena, on Le Nôtre, who is the architect of the gardens of Versailles. And so we had an app dedicated to him. And then we had one on Pinon, who is an extraordinary artist who was at one point exhibited in the gardens. When I was chairing the Versailles, I tried to open up Versailles to contemporary art. We have a night once a year during which everything is open, and I tried to take contemporary arts to Versailles for simply 48 hours. When people travel from far, they don't necessarily want to see a huge Jeff Koons piece in the middle of the main attraction room. Or even in the stables where they could find, a piece of art by Nathalie Crasset, for example. Here is another one. This is an augmented reality experience with the Orsay Museum. We had one piece which is called L'Atelier du Peintre by Courbet, which was being restored. And we decided to show the public more about this particular work of art when it was being restored. So what we did is, instead of the painting, which had been removed, we placed a copy of the painting, and with a tablet and an app, people could discover the history of this masterpiece and the history or the personality of each of the characters that appeared. Then we had some of the characters or some specific parts of the painting which had been removed by the painter, and these also we showed, explaining why he removed them. This is an example with Louvre Lens. This is a 3D visit guide for visitors. It gives you an overwhelming amount of information about everything. A statue. Look at the statue there. What's on the other side? I can't see it. Well, with the app, you can see it. We're still using it today. Quite successful. Here's another one. This is another augmented reality example with the Cité Architecture. This app is dedicated to movement using a contactless technology. You can move from one place to another, and using contactless technology, you have access to small conferences simply from your device. Jean-Marie Letel, who was the curator, would then explain through the app what people are seeing, and we also had this display where all cell phones are captured on a screen moving around the city. It's interesting to see all the movements that happen in a city, and at the same time it's a piece of art because you see the city of Paris with all these little movies, and each phone becomes a heartbeat. So you can see where most of the population concentrates, how people move around, and so on. So augmented reality is real and virtual combined. What were you really combining? Could you be more precise? Well, in this case, you have a phone, right? A cell phone or a mobile phone. And when you are in the vicinity of a tag, it picks up the signal. And what we had was this wall where we then projected all the content, and it was showing all the movement in the city through phones, coming from these phones. So it was really like an image wall. Here's another one. This is another wall we call the social wall at the Institut du Monde Arabe during the Osiris exhibit. Here again, people were able to share, interact, share their impressions, give advice, and so on. This was a very successful and beautiful event. This is Versailles. This is pure virtual reality. You have a headset, and you have access to two events. One which was the Siam Embassy, and the other one was the Bal des Ifs, two events. Very colorful, a lot of movements and sounds, and of course, needless to say, you can do this from home. Here is the Muséum d'Histoire Naturelle. Here we created a tree, the tree of life. With your headset, you can listen to the history of species, the evolution of all species, simply with a headset. You have access to a host of information. Very rich, once again, available on-site or remotely. Even today, you can go to the Muséum d'Histoire Naturelle and discover all this information on the living. The Notre Dame, this is the future now. We decided to organize a virtual visit of Notre Dame, so this is something we're still developing, working on it very hard as we're speaking. And so it's based on 3D modeling, existing model? Yes, absolutely. We will probably start with a traveling exhibit, and we know that it will take years to develop this. It will probably take a little longer than the 5 years initially promised by President Macron. Here we have a new digital experience for classrooms. Classrooms have access to information remotely. This is quite similar to the wall, which I described earlier at the Cité de l'Architecture. We have a movie theater called Eden Cinema in La Ciotat, in the French Riviera, which we restored, and one wall in the movie theater shows movie theaters around the world. So we're connected with 4,300 movie theaters around the world, and depending on the likes, the number of likes and digital activity around each movie theater in the world, you had things displayed on the screen to see what was happening in these movie theaters. And what we saw is that there were very few in Africa, for example, but they're emerging, and new movie theaters are being opened. So it's a beautiful idea because it's this virtual wall on movie theaters. This one I find a bit less exciting. This one, I think this is at the Palais de Tokyo. As you step closer, you would have these beams of light up in the sky. Was this interactive? Yes, this was more interactive. You send a message when you're nearby, and it projects light beams up in the air. These are some of the digital books I mentioned earlier. I mentioned the Bonheur des Dames Candide by Voltaire. The community of readers, lecteur.com. I think we have 230,000 members who are on the network today. They can share their thoughts on literature, on the books they've read, and so on and so on. And here is the Mooc. Here, one of the Moocs. We have different Moocs, as a matter of fact. These have been up and running for years. They're open 24/7 on Impressionism, Louis XIV, Picasso. We have several Moocs on the Pompidou Center on contemporary art. And what's the principle of a Mooc? Quite simple. Between 5 and 7 sessions, which you can follow remotely. You go to the Orange Foundation, the website. You have access to these Moocs. They're open 24/7. Once again, they're videos on all kinds of subjects. Once again, take Picasso during the war. Picasso and women, Picasso and innovation, Picasso and Braque, all kinds of topics to give you fabulous insights on artists, events, and so on. When the Musée de l'Homme opened, we had a Mooc on the Musée de l'Homme as it was being reopened, and we are opening right now another Mooc on prehistory. Prehistory with the Musée des Zézis, which is in Dordogne, near Lascaux, one of the most fabulous places.
And we have a Mooc
available as of today on Les Aisies. And we also have a partnership with the Center for Digital Arts in Enghien, that's in the Paris region. And the forthcoming ones will be on the history of primitive arts. And there'll be one also about the history of telephones. Because after all, we are the Orange Foundation. So we're going to have more and more MOOCs available. So the rationale behind it is to have more and more available on topics that could be of interest to a large audience. Well, what is the audience precisely, the target audience for these MOOCs? Well, there's about 300,000 people who've actually had a look at a MOOC at one point or another. 75% of our audience is made up of women. Half of that audience is working people. So the cliche that you expect to find pensioners, that's false. And 20% and more of our audience is made up of teachers who use the MOOCs with their pupils, with their students. So when it's sometimes difficult to take your students or pupils to a museum, well, MOOCs are another option. Well, thank you very much for all the information. It was a pleasure to have you. Thank you very much.
Eh bien, maintenant, effectivement.
Well, we've just seen how digital tools and digital technology could add to a museum visitor experience, to book reading, and that through superimposing virtual images onto real images, we could create access to information, additional information through your smartphone, your tablet, or a specific device. We've also looked at a number of virtual reality programs that make it possible to explore a place thanks to 360-degree images, so that also places that no longer exist can be toured, or places that can no longer be toured because they're being restored, such as Notre Dame at the moment, can still be toured. So with the restoration, the 3D restoration of or reconstruction of a monument. So it's about 3D modeling of Notre Dame. And these models will enable a virtual tour. We've also observed with Ms. Albanel that building on her experience as Minister for Culture, and back then there was concern that books were an endangered species. Well, the move to all digital has not happened, and some digital tools such as MOOCs have made it possible to open a wider access to arts and culture. So let's look now at how artists have seized on digital technology. And I'm going to ask Jean-Philippe Thiellet, who's the Deputy General Manager of the Paris National Opera, to join me on stage, as well as Fulk Daboville, who's the General Manager of Culture Espace, and Gilles Alvarez, who's the head of the Nemo Digital Art Biennale. So can they all join me on stage?
Bonjour et bienvenue.
Hello, welcome to all of you. Jean-Philippe Thiellet, good morning. So you're the Deputy General Manager of the Paris National Opera and have been in that position since 2014. And you're at the also head of the Bastille Opera, the Garnier Opera, and the Ballet School. And you've also worked as part of different ministries, and you're also the head of Terra Nova, which is a very influential think tank. And you also published essays on Meyerbeer, Bellini, and Rossini. So the Paris National Opera is celebrating its 350th anniversary this year, and you've come up with a new motto. We've been modern for 350 years since Colbert initiated the creation of the Paris Opera. So are you really that modern still? Well, I think we wanted to surprise people with that catchphrase. You know, when you when people picture the Paris National Opera, people often think of something that's rather old, with the traditional ballets and operas. Well, actually, back in the Louis XIV days, the opera was where everything happened. When we were importing Italian opera, same in the 19th century, and in the 21st century, we wanted to make it absolutely clear that we were following in the footsteps of our forerunners. We've celebrated our 350th anniversary, which is a lot more than any football club could ever boast. We offer online booking, and of course, we are surrounded by a highly competitive environment. So, of course, we do not offer only opera, but our audience does not only go to the opera. The sheer diversity of our audience is also what we try to nurture. So if you sit on your hands and stick to the old recipes, well, you run the risk of losing on that diverse audience. So what are the impact of digital on, we've discussed the impact of digital technology on culture as a whole and on performing arts in particular. I think artists of the Paris Opera have really used more and more digital technology on stage, and it's created a new aesthetics. That's really interesting, to go beyond a mere use of the tool to come up with a new aesthetics. Yes, absolutely. The companies that are either in a residency at the opera or are guests have used digital technology, and for example, part of the staging of an opera can be happening on a gigantic screen, and often you had, and quite recently still, sets that were mostly made of painted, big painted scrolls, and now you have not only those physical objects, but also digital. So I've selected a number of pictures. I don't want to play any clips or videos because then people stop listening. But this is a production that started a few days ago of the Traviata, and so you can see on the screen on social media the budding relationship between Violetta and Marcello. So she no longer is consumptive. She now has a cancer. So we've adapted the narrative a little bit, but it is a LED screen that was very costly. It's important to talk money as well, and extremely big. So when you want to be at the cutting edge of modernity, you need to renew your approach constantly. When you project onto the screen a 15-meter high image, I can really assure you that it is quite spectacular. This is Simon Boccanegra. And you have the huge frame of a ship, and the inside of that ship is projected on the screen. And here in Garnier, Trompe la Mort, an opera that was premiered in 2018 and composed in 2018, with those panels, LED panels that were superimposed and constantly moving and changing. So the way sets have been designed for decades, it used to be that mock-ups were designed by the stage manager and were then worked on with the whole production team. So this is completely new approach. Well, beyond aesthetics, digital technology is an incredible tool for promotion purposes. So my next question was about to what extent digital technology has made it possible for you to find new patrons and sponsors. When you have 200,000 tickets to sell, you have to really work hard at selling them. So developing data analysis is absolutely essential. Every other opera goer comes only once a year. So if you do not go digital, you won't be able to sell. But there's also a more creative aspect, which is to try and attract an audience through different proposals, different offers, hence the necessity to have patrons and sponsors. And to that end, we've devised a platform. It is a digital creation platform, but it's not trailers that we make available. We have a brochure, and it's important for us to still have a hard copy of that brochure, and not only the digital version. But that digital platform is about attracting a wider audience that is more sensitive to visual arts or hip-hop. Our next project, and that is also why I'm here today, it's going to be launched on December the 17th. So I would recommend that you have a look as of December the 18th, a look at our new platform. It's called Aria. The logo is not the best thing about that platform, but digital technology is an extraordinary tool to debunk myths. And opera is for all people. It's in foreign languages. I don't understand a thing they're saying. Well, Aria is about really making sure that you can no longer use these excuses to say, well, I don't go to the opera. So it is targeted at the 18 to 25-year-olds, but of course, feel free to have a look, even if you're not in that age bracket. For example, you learn that Star Wars is full of references to Wagner. You learn by having a look at the musical scores of opera. You learn a lot of interesting things. So digital technology is the perfect tool for this. This is very much under construction as we speak. So D-Day minus 47, we're still working hard at it, but we won't miss the launch. And we're very excited to see this platform become available on mobile devices, because this will only be available on mobile. It's not an app, it's a web app. App is outdated now, it's a web app. Okay, so yet another example how to popularize opera, ballet, same as we've seen about art history, how it could be made available to a larger audience. Let me now introduce Fulk Daboville, is the regional manager for Culture Espace. It is a private institution that specializes in cultural institutions ranging from Villa Efrussi de Rothschild in Beaulieu near Nice down to the Théâtre d'Orange and Musée Jacques Marandré, and you are at the head of this institution that is the umbrella entity that includes Musée Mayol and Musée Jacques Marandré, so three sites in Paris. The third one is Atelier Des Lumiere. So you're going to tell us more about Atelier Des Lumiere, but I remember and when I interviewed Bruno Monnier, the head of Culture Espace, before these digital art centers were created, he underlined the fact that there were not enough works of art to meet the demand of emerging countries, so that there was a need for a new way to give access to art, not a physical way anymore. And in 2012, you opened the Carrière des Lumières in Beau-de-Provence and the Atelier des Lumières in Paris. It is a digital art center that creates an immersive experience for visitors. They can immerse themselves in the works of Van Gogh or Klimt. So you're going to tell us more about this, but I have a question for you. What is the goal of these immersive exhibitions? Why did you get into this? Well, thank you for these words of introduction. Maybe so that people understand what we're talking about, I have a short clip.
Voilà, merci.
Thank you. Well, in answer to your question, what is the goal of these immersive exhibitions? Maybe I can start by telling you what Culture Espace is all about. You've listed a number of great sites: the Villa Efrussi de Rothschild, Jacques Marandré Museum, in the amphitheater in Nîmes. We're talking heritage here, so we are operators of these sites. We try to breathe life into them and one of the ways we do that is to host temporary exhibitions. So there was an exhibition on Caravaggio last year at the Jacques Marandré Museum. So we come up with these ideas for exhibitions so as to keep these cultural institutions alive. So digital technology is, of course, part and parcel of our daily lives. So it begged the question, how do we integrate digital in our core business? And that's the question we tackled a few years back. There's two ways to tackle that question. You can consider that it can be an assistance to tours by for example, devising apps virtual reality headsets in Orange or tablets to detail a work of art, the history of a building, and so on and so forth. That's a first way to do it, and we've done that for years now, same as everybody else. But another idea came to us for a more total experience, and that's when the idea emerged to devise those digital exhibitions and to offer that immersive experience, as you saw in the clip. So it's about making the most of a venue. Atelier De Lumiere is an old foundry. Carrière De Lumiere is an old quarry. So it's about revisiting that place, making the most of the architecture, and projecting on the walls these digital images. So it's also a way to break the boundaries by taking art out of museums. It's often intimidating for part of the audience to find yourself in a museum. You feel very small in front of those masterpieces. So we've decided to change tack and search for emotion. So that's what we aim at. Immerse our visitors in that very emotional experience. And a year and a half down the line, because we opened Atelier De Lumiere a year and a half ago, we've demonstrated how we've really opened art to a much wider audience. Our audience is very different from your traditional museum visitors. So they're going to be able to find out about minute details of Gustav Klimt's paintings or Van Gogh's paintings, even though they can't or wouldn't visit the collections where these paintings are. So we've realized that we made a much wider audience feel like discovering more about Gustav Klimt or Van Gogh. So it's a sort of initiation for people who would not be familiar of art and masterpieces. But it's also a way to revisit major figures of art, such as Gustav Klimt or Van Gogh, but not only, because you also open your space to digital designers. You have a studio space within the Atelier De Lumiere that showcases digital designers, but you also organized the Art Immersive Festival recently. That was a several-day-long event. Well, let's start with the images to give you an idea of what we're talking about. That ended last week.
Voilà. Quel était le cheminement?
So, how did we come up with that idea? So we have the big foundry that former plant, Atelier De Lumiere, and we've worked really hard. The idea was initially to project exhibitions onto the walls, but soon enough we came up with another idea, which was to open up to another scene, the digital creation scene, make it possible for digital designers to use that space. So in a small section of the Atelier de Lumiere that we dedicated to digital designers. But then we decided to open the whole space to a festival, organize that competition, and that's what took place week before last. And we discovered content that really surprised us, artistic content that were rich with emotion and got across strong messages about the infinitely small, the infinitely big philosophical questions, but also about energy transition and how fragile our planet Earth is. So it was really a great experience. Are you planning on opening up new additional digital art centers elsewhere in France or abroad? Yes, we're going to open up a Bassin des Lumières in Bordeaux. It's a former submarine base in Bordeaux, and so everything will be underground. So that's our next scheduled opening in France, and we have more coming. There are lots of cities that are interested in these projects, not only in Europe. We're hoping to open a space in New York and elsewhere in the US. Right. Gilles Alvarez, hello. You're the artistic director of the Nemo Digital Art Biennale, which is produced by a highly innovative place in Paris, a venue that's called Le 104. And you've promoted that project, that Nemo project, since 2007. And as of 2004, you've promoted interactive cinema. And up until recently, the Prosopopea Biennale, when objects become alive. And this year, it's actually ongoing. It's the 2019-2020 Biennale, which showcases contemporary digital art and performing arts that are connected to digital technology in 40 different venues in the Paris region.
That is it, exactly. It's two things. It's giving the state-of-the-art update on digital and increasing through digital understanding of how our society is responding. I think we have a quick preview.
Dans l'escalier, mais
So that's the preview video. And the theme of this year's edition is a little provocative. It's about the human species, and the real question is, will humans eventually be replaced, and if yes, by whom? The main exhibit at the 104 is called So Far, So Good, ? Archaeology of a Digital World. It's an abandoned digital museum in 2019 when the human species is wiped off the surface of the planet. It's very much a speculative work of art. Archaeology of 2019. What will happen after the potential disappearance of humans, possibly replaced by AI? So we're using speculative design and pushing it to its limits to invent scenarios that are more or less dystopic, disturbing, sometimes attractive, to ask very powerful questions about the present, keeping in mind that today, in the present, we can still take action. The objective of all technologies is trade, primarily, and control. But we think that if artists and scientists try to answer and address the right questions, engineers and politicians can come up with better answers, or at least less or fewer bad answers. That's pretty pessimistic, pretty gloomy. You've also done some interrogations around nanotechnologies. Oh yeah, that's it, very much so. And we also can talk about performing arts, the living performing arts. I can throw out a few examples of creative work we've done. We've used virtual reality in living arts, where we have people on stage, and then the audience uses virtual headsets to actually project into a virtual reality. Again, we have very dystopic scenario. One called 24/7. The question being, how is technology little by little taking over our sleep, which is one of the territories it hasn't really invaded yet, or crime prevention through guilt, using the audience. The question of robots. We have an artist called Joris Mathieu who has created a performance without actors, using 3D robotic arms. Again, it's very fictitious. Israel Galvan, the choreographer, is using machine learning with objects on stage. These objects don't imitate him, but they really become his extension. And in a very poetic way, he says, it's my way of surviving. Once I disappear, it will be my survival. Rimini Protocol. Rimini Protocol is holding a conference with a humanoid robot on stage. Is that a performance? It's a conference/performance. So we have a humanoid robot on stage speaking about how you feel when you're facing this artificial creature. And it's a fully artificial creature. The face, seen from the front, it looks like a more or less normal person, but the back, you can tell that it's just a machine. And then we have a sci-fi book called Les Furtifs from Alain Damasio, who's been very successful this year in bookstores. Adapted by Frédéric Delias on stage. It presents a society where large cities are privatized. Paris belongs to LVMH. Orange belongs to Orange. The city of Orange belongs to Orange, the company. And we live in a world of full control, where we have human beings, who come and go, and using space, sound, holographics, these people are shown, or the traces of these people are shown. So, in conclusion, what's interesting is not so much how technology is benefiting artists from a technical standpoint, but rather the subjects art allows them to engage in. With sometimes a very critical approach, which you don't necessarily find in innovation. Right, you go beyond technique. These are real societal questions. It's not so much about technology, and artists have really are really leveraging technology to discover new territories. So at the Nemo Biennale, you have different things. Could you tell us a little bit about AI? Well, I can see the clock is ticking. We have one artist whose name is Christophe Bruno, whom I really enjoy. He teaches machines to unlearn how to paint. He considers that machine learning is too academic. And neuronal networks are simply learning how to imitate. And he says, well, he decided to feed his robots, his AI, with poorly painted canvases. And what the machines come up with is crap. It's crappy art. I hope this translates in English or Chinese, but yeah, it's pretty crappy. And he then uses AI to create hybrids between well-known masterpieces. For example, Millet's Glaneuse painting is mixed with Yves Klein, the Radeau de la Méduse, combined with Impression Soleil-Levant. All kinds of paintings are merged. And what are the results like? Sometimes pretty impressive. You'll be surprised. And again, he suggests that machine learning should also include bugs, mistakes, errors, scratches, and so on, instead of perfection and just perfect copycatting. Quite interesting. Artificial intelligence, as we all know, doesn't exist. I'm sorry to say, even if this is a Huawei conference, it's an oxymoron. Machine learning is only learning which is all but autonomous. But I think it's primarily a marketing concept, first and foremost, not so much a scientific one. And I think this will remain for quite some time. So the artist's imaginary can actually explore, discover, come up with new narratives. Back in the 1950s, sci-fi robots in sci-fi novels were 10 times more interesting and exciting than the real robots we have these days. So I guess I will make this my conclusion. The human imagination on AI is much more interesting than AI itself, and much more powerful and stronger than AI itself. Okay. Thanks for giving so much importance and space to humans. It's not that pessimistic. Of course it's not pessimistic. We're actually very optimistic at the Biennale. I think we're very much ahead of machines. So let's just enjoy that. Okay, well, thank you for your presentations and talks. Thank you for attending.
Merci à vous. Eh bien, on parlait d'intelligence artificielle.
Well, since we're talking about AI, in our third session, we're going to explore AI once again. AI and how AI is perceived by artists. We'll have a group of artists represented. They're called Obvious. Pierre Fautrel is a member of this group of artists. He will tell us about works of art, masterpieces he created, uses GAN. He'll tell us what GAN is. He will also explain how AI can facilitate visits, art exhibit or museum visits using chatbots. We'll have the founder of Ask Mona, who will be with us to explain. Marion Carré. Pierre Fautrel, would you be kind enough to join me on stage?
Bonjour. Marion Carré, fondatrice d'Ask Mona.
Marion Carré, the founder of Ask Mona. Hi, Marion, and Philippe Rivière, who's the head of digital at Paris Musée. Welcome to you. Welcome all three.
Donc effectivement, l'intelligence.
Okay, so AI is we've explored AI from different angles since this morning. Let me introduce Pierre Fautrel, who is the co-founder. Hi, Pierre. You're one of the co-founders of Obvious, which you founded in 2017. You work on AI algorithms, and you're revisiting important events in the history of art. You became notorious in 2018 when at Christie's, New York, a piece of art was created using artificial intelligence. It's called Edmond. It was Edmond Bellamy. It reached $432,500, which made the headlines. There was a media frenzy around it, and Pierre Fautrel, could you tell us how you created that particular series of works from your group of artists? Yes, we're artists and we like to communicate about AI. So we decided to pick up on specific moments, events of history of arts to do so. So the concept's quite simple. We want to reach out to an audience which is as broad as possible. Not only those who are able to understand what an algorithm means or does, or what AI means. We try to reach out to a much broader audience. So we created a number of works of arts. I'm going to display some of them. We're trying to demystify AI, make it less dramatic, and show what it does, what it doesn't do. And it's not about killing robots, it's simply about algorithms that can sometimes help you do wonderful things. So we started with this piece of art. So this is a portrait, right? So pretty classical. So this is the piece of art you were referring to. And this really put us in the limelight. It gave us huge exposure. Articles were written on this around the world in multiple languages. So it's interesting because this gives you a different vision of AI. Here we have the Bellamy family. So these are part of the same series with the Comte de Bellamy, the Bellamy Count. The Duke of Bellamy and Mrs. Bellamy. So they're all part of these portraits, initial series of portraits, simply to show what an algorithm can do. In a sense, it makes it less scary. It's not about killing robots. Right, so what you do is you have a database which you feed. Yeah, let me tell you how it works. You feed the algorithm with tons of data, tons of images, right? And it reads codes, and it looks what codes they have in common. So we gave the algorithm tons of portraits from the 14th through the 15th century. The algorithm then interprets the codes. You, the artist, tell it what to do, and based on the inputs it receives, you tell it what to choose to create your new piece of art. So after this first series, we decided to move into Japanese work. Same thing. We really enjoy Japanese art, and we tried to talk about the time when electricity was or power was introduced in society and when AI was introduced. Different moments, different times. Some people were scared, some people love it, some people want to invest, other people run away from it. Same thing for power when power arrived as when AI arrived. So we used the traditional stamping, mokuwanga technology, or technique rather. Mokuwanga, here we go, mokuhanga. Is how the technique used by printing by Japanese artists. So this is the traditional way of doing, right? So taking this a few steps further, we have other projects. This year is the Da Vinci year. So we developed Da Vinci codexes. We have 3 in total, using 3,000 pages of the 7,000 pages on Da Vinci available in the world. We have a partnership with the Lascaux caves to create prehistoric art using AI. We are also considering switching from 2D to 3D to work on sculpture, for example, to have a more in-depth understanding of what an AI can do. We'd like to have Roman and Greek sculpture. And the fabulous thing of AI is that it can generate tons of data. We have a project which is called Mérouane. Mérouane is the symbol, the female symbol of France. We're going to have 32,000 different Mérouanes, and each city in Paris can download city or village or small town can download their own Mérouane, created by our artificial intelligence algorithm. People have a lot of preconceived ideas about misconceptions around AI. Some think that AI is pressing on a button. I have a question for you. Who is the author of this? The very first series that you showed on portraits and then the one on Japanese prints. Who is the author? Is it you as a group of artists? Is it the algorithm? Because the algorithm actually signs off each part, each piece of art. Yes, absolutely. And that is also to make people realize that something's edgy. But to answer that question, let me tell you precisely what the process is like. We start by picking a subject, Japanese art or portraits. We create a database, we clean it to make it highly qualitative, to make sure that we don't have any derivatives. Then you run the algorithm using the database. This is where you do test and trying. You test, you try, you try again, and the algorithm then starts generating images. We pick the ones we consider to be the most relevant ones. For example, Japanese stamps. You take 3 characters: the mean one, the good one, and the transvestite one. These are the ones you typically find in Japan. So the human intervention defines who the author is then. Yes, and then we choose the medium as well. On Japanese prints, for example, we use the traditional Japanese printing technique. So the choice of the author is everywhere. It impacts each stage, each step. It's a little bit like photography. Who's the author of a picture? It's not the camera. It's the person behind the camera, the person pressing the shutter and conveying emotion. Well, the first series you showed on portraits, you created these pieces of arts using algorithms, right? And then you printed them onto a canvas. And by doing so, you created this, you did the same thing for Japanese prints. And then you used the help of a Japanese expert on prints. So you used his know-how, his expertise. So why did you not just why did you decide to go through that extra step? Because it is important to communicate about this know-how. AI gives you exposure, tremendous exposure, but we believe in giving back. It's important to also talk about other things such as philosophy and AI, the know-how of this traditional craftsmanship, artistic heritage, and so on. So it's not just about digital work. It's we're trying to reach out to an audience which is as broad as possible and always push the limits. And we couldn't do it in the first series because we didn't have the resources to do it. And we're trying to get better, between the first series, second series, and we have much more in the pipeline. So by doing so, you're completely short-circuiting, bypassing the art market, the art industry, the traditional channels of galleries and so on. What you do is you sell your work of art on your website, correct? That's right. We consider we don't need galleries, not for the time being. We don't really need commercial outlets. We have, thanks to this event at Christie's, we became known enough, and this is how we can today bypass galleries. If people are interested, they can either find online information, or we can send it to them. Who are the people who buy your art? People who enjoy new technologies, techies, or investors, people interested in what they consider will be art of the future. Okay, thank you. Let's continue on AI. Let me introduce Marion Carré. She's the co-founder and head of Ask Mona. Ask Mona is a conversational chatbot on culture. She recently also founded the Ask Mona Studio, which is a chatbot studio used by about 30 cultural institutions, the Louvre, the Grand Palais, and others. And this is exciting. Since 2016, in 2016 you wrote your thesis on AI serving culture, very much in line with what we're discussing today. And this year, you're teaching on AI, when AI defies culture, history, figures, and mutations of painting during the 20th century. So just to transition from Pierre Fautrel to you consider AI to be a new creative medium, right? That is absolutely correct. And just to echo what Pierre said, yes, indeed. I think it is important to consider art and artistic work as an opportunity to deconstruct a lot of the myths of AI. When you really break down the artistic process, which is what Pierre just did, you realize that artists have a very important role to play, even with digital creation. Digital is a tool. It is a powerful tool. It opens new doors, new practices. It pushes the boundaries. It allows certain artists to actually inspire themselves. So AI, in contact with art and culture, is a way for us to examine or re-examine things. Creative, artistic creation, the role of authors, the role of the creative process, and so on. So you created a set of tools, including conversational chatbots, both for the general public, but also for cultural institutions. Could you please shed some light on all this? Sure. We have several things. We have a chatbot, which is a conversational medium, which provides cultural information based on requests of the end user. And we have studios where we create this type of assistance. We started based on a very simple observation. We realized that especially in younger audiences, enjoy to have interactive conversations. A bit like mobile phones in art exhibits. People use their phones all the time in the middle of exhibits to find information on Wikipedia, for example. Well, we decided to offer an alternative to, in a sense, a new gateway to culture. And every time we develop a personal assistant, I'll give you some examples in a moment. I'll give you the example of the Grand Palais. We make sure that it does have the right values of the institution it represents, and we then offer visitors before or during the visitor to have a position with respect to the works that are shown. It is not just passive, it doesn't just pick up information, but it actually truly interacts, and visitors can ask questions to the system and will get answers. So it's I'll show you a few examples. This is what we did at the Grand Palais Red Rouge exhibit. Here we go. So we have visual recognition, where a piece of art is taken, and you take a picture of it, and then the chatbot pushes out information to you. I wasn't expecting the sound, says the speaker, but here you go. As you can see, it acts like a personal assistant. It's called Ask Betty. Betty was the concierge who worked at the Grand Palais for 30 years. She knew it inside out. And she's brought back to life here as she is the personal assistant. Interesting. You did similar things at the Louvre and the Louis Vuitton Foundation, is my understanding? Right. So these tools are eventually going to replace traditional audio guides, or are they just an additional layer? I would say an additional layer. Today, we have different types of audiences, right? It's not about killing the audio guide. Some people are really very keen on having audio guides. It's not the majority, but a lot of people like audio guides. And then a lot of other people would like to see new solutions to explore art. So I don't think it's, one or the other. I believe in inclusion. And to include more people, it is important to have more options to offer. With more options, you're going to satisfy more people. Quite obvious. So with these chatbots, do you have some sort of an estimate of footfall in museums? Rather, do you know if you are effectively reaching different audiences thanks to your technology? Well, yes. For example, we organized an event, a night-long event on books, where we took the example of classical literature to start with, and then with books, with questions and answers coming from different visitors, we were able to observe interesting patterns and trends. And we did see indeed that in certain events, the number of people visiting increased.
Right, thank you very much, Marion. Well, still discussing digital tools, Paris Musée has included a number of digital tools to its cultural offer. But let me first introduce Philippe Rivière. Welcome. You're the head of the Communications and Digital Department at Paris Musée, and you're also the deputy manager in charge of development. That brings together 14 museums and a number of institutions. So as of 2016, you launched a web portal with a lot of digital content from the collections of these museums, and you've recently launched new tools, 3D and Gigapixel. Can you tell us more about these tools? Yes, of course. I'm the only representative from a public institution here, but I think we share the same vision as many startup companies or young entrepreneurs. We think that, yes, the digital technology is available, but we still have to figure out how it's used and how it could be used, and by whom. So the Gigapixel project. Will it launch the clip if I click? Yes. So it is not a new technology per se. It's a ultra high definition technology. Very interesting for museums, of course, thanks to a project that's been funded 100% by the European Union. MapPixel is our partner and has made it possible for us to work on this new media, Gigapixel. So we analyzed over 110 works that are available on a dedicated site, but also on the museum website. And the point is to make it possible to discover in the most minute details that work of art, and to discover that work of art in a completely different manner. So you'll be guided through all the objects and items we've digitized. So what's interesting to observe is that thanks to this new ways of discovering a work of art, you can it gives you a completely different take on a work of art, but we've experimented in Spain in early summer 100% digital exhibition on huge devices, but so there's also that use that is interesting for us to showcase these works of art around the world. This makes for a possibility to discover a work of art completely differently. It's an augmented discovery, and a back office for this European project is extremely simple and straightforward. So it can be used in workshops for young students or pupils from primary schools aged between 6 and 11. They can use that content to build their own storytelling on these works, so that they can share it then afterwards in the classroom, and also share with the family and potentially get the family to come to the museum. So you reach out thus to a different audience, schools. But there's another tool that you've devised recently, 3D, which is more targeted to disabled members of the audience. Yes, we've worked a lot on digitization and 3D printing. So we've worked on a number of works from the Victor Hugo's house, and also the Cognac-J Museum, which showcases art from the 18th century. And we're currently working with the Cernuschi Museum of Asian Art. So all these works are available on the Sketchfab page of the Paris Musée website. You can view them and even download them, and why not print them. So that can be a great tool for the visitor experience. There's a lot of things that are hidden behind the surface of a bronze statue. So, yet again, it's a new way for the audience to discover a work of art. It's very important for us to have good control over that 3D technology. Of course, everybody loves touching in a museum, so we've wanted to also make that possible so people can touch the works, but also for visually impaired members of the audience, they can handle, touch the objects, such as a sculpture. Yes, so even very fragile sculptures can be touched and placed in the hands of visually impaired members of the audience. That's extremely interesting for us. This is the second type of printing, less qualitative but much faster. And we work on combining physical objects with digital objects. So that you can have 3D objects placed on the screen and they'll be recognized by the screen, so that visitors, for example, can play board games from the 18th century. Another example is on a board, members of the audience can replace monuments from Paris heritage. So the objective is to target a younger audience, and that's also your aim when you use mixed reality. What is that about? Well, in the new museum, which commemorates the liberation of Paris. It's the Maréchal Leclerc Jean Moulin Museum that recently reopened in Paris. And that museum is located on Place d'Enfer Rochereau, which is highly strategic because that's where a command post was located, and that's where members from the Resistance actually organized the first waves of the Paris liberation. But it is actually underground, so it's extremely damp, and so it's a great locale because you really find yourself where members of the Resistance operated from, but you can't really get people to experience the sheer excitement and hustle and bustle of those events in 1944, which is why we've found that digital tools would be most apt. And here's a clip, or not. I was too fast. Could we go back to the previous slide?
Bon, je crois que je vais laisser la régie.
Oui, nous sommes pris par le temps, donc peut-être merci de nous expliquer, oui.
Donc voilà, c'est le film.
So here's an archive. This is archive footing, and we've drawn inspiration from that archive footing to reconstruct those events. So visitors can interact with these characters, and they can learn more about how these people lived, slept, ate, and so on and so forth. So So we've conducted a satisfaction survey for this fairly unique experience. A lot of museums have tried, but not many actually achieved it. And satisfaction rates are really good. And people tell us that they really enjoy discovering that place in that way. You mentioned very briefly open access to some of your content. Yes, Paris Musée has an extremely rich collection of 600,000 works of arts that have already been digitized. And as of January, next January, we want to give open access to 100,000 more. So we work on different issues of size, definition, but also royalties. Thank you very much, Philippe. Well, I think we clearly got a clearer idea. We clearly got a better idea of how these tools can give wider access to culture. Many thanks to all of you for taking part in this panel discussion. I apologize for going over our initial schedule, and many thanks for the conclusion.
And it's such a wide-ranging discussion which took us into some highly original and thought-provoking areas, and also for the array of really high-powered contributors we've had. So thank you very much for that. Well, after a series of excellent sessions, I'm sure everyone is ready for lunch, so I'm going to ask our distinguished guests to lead the way. Please enjoy your lunch, and I look forward to seeing you for the start of this afternoon's session at 1:40 p.m. A couple of reminders.